The Grand Nexus station floated in the darkness of space like a jewel made of metal and light. Inside its massive halls, creatures from 1,000 different worlds walked, flew, and drifted past each other. Some had skin like crystals that caught the light. Others were made of pure energy, glowing as they moved. Giant warriors with 4 arms nodded respectfully to small beings that floated in the air, speaking directly into minds with thoughts instead of words. Park Day pushed his cleaning cart down the hall of eternity, his footsteps silent on floors so polished he could see the stars reflected in them. He was 43 years old, his back hurt most days and nobody ever looked at him. That was fine. He preferred it that way. "Excuse me," he said softly, moving his cart to the side as a tall crystalline being glided past. The creature's body was see-through like glass, and rainbow colors danced across the walls as it moved. It did not look down at Day. They never did. This was Ambassador Velmorith, one of the most important leaders in the entire galaxy. Day cleaned his office every Tuesday. The ambassador had never once said hello. Day continued pushing his cart toward the center of the hall. 7 enormous stones stood there, each one taller than 3 men. They were dark and smooth, covered in symbols that seemed to shift when you weren't looking directly at them. A small metal sign near the base said they were 10,000 years old. The stones of Karthan they were called. Sacred relics from a civilization that had vanished long ago. Day had cleaned around these stones twice a week for 3 years. He knew every scratch on the floor near them, every spot where dust liked to collect. Humans like Day were new to galactic society. Earth had only been invited to join 50 years ago, and most alien species still thought of humans as children, clumsy and simple-minded. Humans could work on the station but only in basic jobs. Cleaning, cooking, moving cargo. Nothing important. They did not mind. The job paid well enough to send money back to Earth. It was quiet here at night when all the important beings were asleep in their quarters. Just him, his mop, and the soft hum of the station's engines keeping everyone alive in the cold void of space. He got down on his knees to scrub at a stubborn mark on the floor. His supervisor, a 4-armed warrior named Calvin, had been very clear in his instructions. Clean around the stones, human. Never touch the stones themselves. They are sacred. Do you understand? Day understood. He always followed the rules. Tonight he was polishing the floor near the 3rd stone, the one with a crack running down its left side. He reached under the base with his broom trying to get at some dirt that had built up there. The handle slipped in his hand. The wooden end tapped against the stone's surface. Nothing happened for one long heartbeat. Then light exploded through the entire hall. Day fell backward, throwing his hands up to protect his eyes. All 7 stones were blazing with brilliant white light, so bright he could barely see. Strange geometric patterns appeared on the walls, the ceiling, the floor, triangles and circles and shapes that hurt his brain to look at. The stones were singing, making a sound like 1,000 bells all ringing at once. The sound vibrated in his chest and made his teeth ache. "No, no, no," Day whispered, his heart pounding so hard he thought it might burst. "I didn't mean to touch it. I'm sorry." Alarms began screaming throughout the station. Red warning lights flashed in the corridors outside. Day could hear the sound of running feet and shouted commands in a dozen different languages. The stones grew brighter still. The patterns on the walls began to move, flowing like water, forming symbols Day had never seen before. Mathematical equations appeared and vanished. Star maps of distant galaxies flickered in and out of existence. And something else, images of worlds burning, civilizations falling, darkness spreading across the stars. "This can't be happening," Day said to himself, still sitting on the floor with his broom lying next to him. "I'm just a janitor. I just clean floors." The security doors at the end of the hall burst open with a crash. Armed guards in black armor rushed in, their weapons pointed at Day. Behind them came Ambassador Velmorith himself, moving faster than Day had ever seen the ancient being move. The crystalline body was flickering between colors, red, blue, purple. Something Day's co-worker had once told him meant a Vex Theory was feeling strong emotion. The stones, Velmorith's voice echoed through the hall like wind chimes in a storm. The stones have not responded to anyone in 10,000 years. Not to the greatest warriors. Not to the wisest scholars. Not to me, and I have lived for 800 years. More beings crowded into the hall now. Scientists with scanning devices. Telepaths with glowing eyes. Military commanders with weapons and suspicious faces. All of them were staring at Park Day, who was still sitting on the floor in his gray maintenance uniform with his name tag crooked on his chest. "I'm sorry," Day said, his voice small. "It was an accident. I was just cleaning." But the stones continued to glow, filling the hall with light so bright it could probably be seen from the other side of the station. They pulsed like a heartbeat, and with each pulse they seemed to grow brighter, as if they had been sleeping for thousands of years and had finally woken up. The council chamber was enormous and felt cold despite the perfect temperature controls. Park Day sat in a chair that had been built for beings much larger than him. His feet barely touched the floor. He felt like a small child sitting in his father's chair back home in Seoul, waiting to be punished for breaking something valuable. The chamber was shaped like a bowl, with seats rising up in circles all around him. Hundreds of alien beings filled those seats. Day recognized some of them from his cleaning routes. The floating Orn who left trails of sparkles in the air, the six-legged Tar-9 scientists who always worked late in their labs, the massive stone-like Dern who barely moved but watched everything with ancient eyes. All of them were staring at him now. "This is ridiculous," growled Warchief Caldrine from his seat high above. The massive warrior had 4 arms, each one thick with muscle, all crossed over his armored chest. A human? The sacred stones respond to beings of cosmic significance. Heroes. Leaders. Not maintenance workers who push brooms. Several beings in the audience made sounds of agreement. Day felt his face grow hot with embarrassment. "The evidence is clear, Warchief," said a soft voice that seemed to speak directly inside Day's head. He looked up to see High Scholar Hannah floating near the center of the chamber. She was an Orn, her body barely solid, more like smoke shaped into the form of a small person. Her people were telepaths who could read thoughts and speak mind to mind. Park Day touched the stones of Karthan, and they awakened after 10,000 years of silence. "We cannot simply ignore this fact." Ambassador Velmorith stood at the head of the council. His crystalline body caught the lights and threw rainbow patterns across the walls. "We must test him," the ancient leader announced. "Genetic scanning. Psionic evaluation. Historical lineage verification. We will discover what makes him special." The tests began immediately and lasted for hours. Day was taken to medical bays where machines scanned every part of his body. Doctors took samples of his blood, his hair, his skin. They put him in a chamber that hummed and made his bones feel strange. They attached sensors to his head and asked him to think about different things while they watched screens covered in numbers and graphs. Between tests, different aliens asked him endless questions. "Where were you born?" "Seoul, South Korea." "On Earth." "What is your family history?" "My father was a mechanic. My mother worked in a restaurant. My grandfather was a farmer." "Have you ever had visions? Dreams of the future? Voices speaking to you?" "No. Nothing like that." "Have you traveled to any sacred sites? Touched any ancient artifacts? Studied any mystical texts?" "No. I've only been off Earth for 3 years, and I've spent that whole time cleaning floors on this station." More scans. More tests. More questions. Finally, after what felt like an entire day, the lead scientist, a Tar-9 with 6 thin legs and huge compound eyes, approached Ambassador Velmorith with the results. Day sat nearby, exhausted and hungry, while they discussed him as if he were not there. "The results are conclusive," the scientist said, holding up a data tablet. "Park Day is completely, utterly, perfectly ordinary. No genetic mutations. No latent psionic abilities. No special markers in his DNA. No divine ancestry. By every measurement we have, he is an average human being." Warchief Caldrine stood up from his seat. "Then the stones malfunctioned. This is a waste of the council's time." "Perhaps we should verify," Velmorith said quietly, "before we dismiss this matter entirely." They brought Day back to the Hall of Eternity. He was so tired he could barely walk straight. 2 guards escorted him, one on each side as if he might try to run away. The hall was empty now except for the council members and a few scientists with recording equipment. The 7 stones stood silent and dark in the center of the hall. "Approach them," Velmorith instructed. Day walked forward slowly. His legs felt like rubber. He was hungry and tired and wanted nothing more than to go back to his small quarters and sleep. He got within 3 meters of the stones. They exploded with light. It was even brighter than before if that was possible. The entire hall filled with brilliant white radiance. The geometric patterns appeared again on every surface, moving and shifting. The harmonic sound filled the air, making the floor vibrate beneath Day's feet. But this time something new happened. Images erupted from the stone surfaces, projected into the air like holograms. Day saw ancient cities burning. He saw vast fleets of ships going dark and silent. He saw beings like the ones around him now, screaming as their technology failed and their minds went blank. He saw a spreading darkness moving across the galaxy, consuming everything in its path. Words appeared in the air, written in a language Day did not know. The station's translation computers tried to interpret them, but the machines kept glitching and restarting. Finally, one phrase came through clearly enough for everyone to understand. The unraveling comes. High Scholar Hannah floated closer to the projections, her smoke-like form flickering with concern. Her telepathic voice filled everyone's minds. The prophecy of the Keeper. I have read about it in the old text. It speaks of one who will come when the galaxy faces its greatest threat. The Keeper will not be a warrior or a scholar. The Keeper will be one who sees what others overlook. One who finds truth in simplicity when all complexity fails. Warchief Caldrine stared at the images of destruction, his forearms now hanging loose at his sides. Are you saying this human is the Keeper? This janitor who cannot even read the sacred texts? The prophecy says the Keeper will be unexpected, Hannah replied. What could be more unexpected than this? Day looked at the images floating in the air around him. Worlds ending, civilizations collapsing, the spreading darkness that the stones called the unraveling. His hands were shaking. His mouth was dry. I don't understand, he said quietly. I'm nobody special. I couldn't save my marriage. I couldn't keep my daughter from being disappointed in me. I left Earth because I failed at everything that mattered. How am I supposed to save the galaxy? The stones pulsed brighter, as if answering a question he had not asked out loud. Velmortha's crystalline body shifted through a dozen colors before settling on a deep blue that Day had learned meant the ancient being was thinking hard about something important. Whether we understand it or not, Velmorth said finally, the stones have chosen. Park Day will be given quarters in the diplomatic wing. High Scholar Hannah, you will serve as his advisor. Warchief Caldrine, assign him a cultural liaison. We must prepare him for whatever is coming. Prepare me for what? Day asked, but nobody answered. The stones continued to glow, and the images of destruction continued to play, showing over and over again what would happen if the unraveling was not stopped. Park Day's new quarters were all wrong. The room was 3 times larger than his old one, with a bed soft enough to swallow him whole and windows that showed the endless stars outside. There were chairs made of materials he could not name, a bathroom with a tub big enough for 4 people, and a food dispenser that could make meals from 100 different worlds. He hated it. His old room had been small and simple. Just a bed, a small desk, and a closet where he kept his 2 spare uniforms and a case of instant noodles from Earth. It had been close to the maintenance department, close to his work, close to everything familiar. This place felt like a museum and he was the exhibit. Is there anything you need, Keeper Day? Asked Silne, hovering nervously near the door. She was young for a Vextheri, her crystalline body still showing hints of the blue color that marked youth in her species. The council had assigned her as his cultural liaison, which apparently meant she was supposed to follow him everywhere and make sure he did not embarrass humanity. Don't call me that, Day said, rubbing his temples. A headache was building behind his eyes, the kind he always got when he was stressed. My name is just Day. Or Park Day if you want to be formal. And yes, I need something. I need to go back to work. I have 3 floors to clean tonight, and my supervisor is going to be angry that I missed my shift. But the council has assigned you to. I didn't ask for this, Day interrupted, more sharply than he intended. He took a breath and tried to calm down. I'm sorry. I know this isn't your fault. But I'm a janitor, Silne. That's what I do. That's what I'm good at. I clean floors and empty trash and fix broken things. I don't save galaxies. Silne's crystalline body shifted colors. A pattern Day was learning meant she was uncomfortable. I will inform the council of your wishes, she said quietly and left. Day sat on the edge of the too-soft bed and put his face in his hands. What was he doing here? 3 days ago his biggest worry was whether he had enough cleaning solution to last the week. Now aliens were calling him Keeper, and showing him visions of the galaxy ending. A knock on the door. Before Day could answer, High Scholar Hannah floated through the wall. Apparently telepaths did not need to wait for permission. You are struggling, Hannah said. Her voice in his mind was gentle, like a whisper in an empty room. I'm a 43-year-old janitor from Seoul who couldn't keep his marriage together, Day said bitterly. I have a daughter back on Earth who hasn't spoken to me in 3 years because I'm such a disappointment. And now everyone thinks I'm supposed to save the galaxy because I accidentally touched some old rocks with my broom. The stones are not rocks, Hannah said, floating closer. And I do not believe you did anything by accident. May I show you something? Before Day could answer, Hannah's telepathic ability wrapped around his mind, and suddenly he was seeing memories that were not his own. He saw the stones of Kar then being carved by an ancient civilization. He saw thousands of beings trying to activate them over millennia, warriors, scholars, kings, prophets. All of them failed. Then he saw himself, tired and ordinary, pushing a broom and just trying to do his job well. The prophecy speaks of one who sees what others overlook, Hannah said softly. Perhaps that is you. The vision faded. Day's head was spinning. Before he could respond, alarms began blaring throughout the station. They rushed to the engineering bay where chaos had erupted. The station's main power systems were fluctuating wildly, causing random shutdowns across multiple decks. The chief engineer, a brilliant Tar-9 named Torvan, was surrounded by holographic displays showing complex data streams and mathematical models. I don't understand it, Torvan was saying, his 6 legs dancing nervously. The quantum processors should be stable. The subspace relays are functioning perfectly. Every system checks out, but we keep getting these power spikes. Look at the pattern, it makes no sense. Dozens of scientists crowded around, all offering theories. Dimensional bleed-through. Quantum entanglement disruption. Temporal flux from the nearby neutron star. Day stood in the doorway, forgotten as usual. He watched the engineers argue, watched the holographic displays flash with numbers and graphs. And then he noticed something. Excuse me, he said quietly. Nobody heard him over the arguing. Excuse me, he said louder. Torvan turned, clearly annoyed at being interrupted. What is it, human? When do the power spikes happen? Day asked. Randomly. That's the entire problem. No, Day said, pulling out his old maintenance data pad. The screen was cracked and the device was 3 years old, but it still worked. They're not random. Look, spikes at 2,200 hours, 0200 hours, and 0600 hours. Those are the exact times the cleaning crews change shifts. The room went silent. Every alien was staring at him now. What are you suggesting? Belmorith asked. The ambassador had arrived without Day noticing. We use a nano-cleaning solution on the quantum processor housings, Day explained. Regular cleaners leave residue that builds up, so the manufacturer recommended this special solution. But nanoparticles can interfere with delicate quantum states. The residue probably accumulates in microscopic layers throughout the day. It's too small for your sensors to flag as significant, but it's enough to cause disruptions in the quantum field. Torvan's compound eyes went wide. That's actually possible. We never considered something so simple. Our diagnostic programs are designed to look for complex problems, not basic chemical interference. They tested Day's theory immediately. Shut down the quantum processors, cleaned them with pure distilled water instead of the nano solution, restarted them. The power fluctuations stopped completely. The engineering bay erupted in relieved chatter. Scientists were already updating their diagnostic protocols to check for simple problems before complex ones. In the Hall of Eternity, the 7 stones glowed softly as if pleased. Warchief Kaldrine found Day in the corridor afterward. The massive warrior stood there, all 4 arms hanging loose at his sides, and what Day had learned was a gesture of respect among the Kethrak people. I was wrong about you, Kaldrine said gruffly. You may not be a warrior, but perhaps you are not entirely useless. It was not exactly an apology, but from a Kethrak warchief, it was close enough. That night, Day lay in his too large bed in his too fancy quarters, staring at the stars through the window. He thought about his daughter Minicio back on Earth. About the last time they had spoken, 3 years ago, when she had told him she was tired of him running away from his problems. Maybe she had been right. Maybe he had run away. But now there was nowhere left to run. The stones had chosen him for reasons he did not understand, and something called the unraveling was coming. Something that would destroy everything if it was not stopped. Day closed his eyes and tried to sleep, but the soft glow of the stones in the Hall of Eternity seemed to pulse in rhythm with his heartbeat, even from here. The galaxy needed a hero. All it had was a janitor who knew how to clean things. Somehow that would have to be enough. The warship Dawn's Fury barely made it through the docking bay doors. Park Day was in the cargo bay doing a routine inventory check when he heard the emergency sirens. He looked up just in time to see the massive Kethrak vessel limping into port, leaving a trail of frozen atmosphere leaking from its damaged hull. Half the ship looked like it had been dipped in acid. The metal was melted and twisted into strange shapes. The running lights were all dead. Even the backup systems appeared to be offline. The ship was coasting on emergency thrusters alone, and those were sputtering and failing. Medical teams and emergency crews sprinted past Day, their equipment clattering as they ran. He set down his data pad and followed them, his heart pounding. Something very bad had happened out there. By the time Day reached the command center, They were already interviewing the survivors. He stood in the back of the room near the door. He should not have been there. This was a classified military briefing, but High Scholar Hannah had started bringing him to important meetings over the past week. She insisted that his perspective was valuable, though Day still did not understand why anyone would care what a janitor thought about military matters. The ship's captain, a scarred Kethrak warrior named Morven, sat in a chair that was too small for his massive four-armed body. His armor was scorched black. One of his arms hung limp and useless. His eyes looked hollow, haunted by something terrible. "Report, Captain," War Chief Kaldrine commanded. The War Chief stood at attention, but Day could see the tension in all four of his arms. "We were on routine patrol in Sector 7, Morven said, his voice rough. "Our sensors detected nothing unusual. No ships, no anomalies, no energy signatures. Then suddenly, everything died. Every system on the ship all at once. Weapons, shields, navigation, even our personal translator implants. It was like something reached into the ship and turned everything off." "What attacked you?" Kaldrine asked. "We never saw it," Morven replied. "But we felt it. Like a presence. A vast intelligence that was examining us, taking us apart piece by piece. The more advanced the system was, the faster it failed. Our quantum weapons went first. Then the AI tactical computer. Then the shield generators. The simple mechanical systems lasted longer, but even those eventually stopped working." Ambassador Velmortha's crystalline body flickered through worried colors. "What happened to your crew?" "Most went into stasis. The ship's automatic safety systems put them to sleep to preserve oxygen when life support started failing. But the psionic specialists..." Morven's voice broke. "Their minds were too evolved, too sophisticated. Whatever attacked us, it targeted them specifically. They're all catatonic now. Medical can't wake them up." A cold feeling spread through Day's chest. He remembered the visions the stones had shown him. Civilizations falling, darkness spreading, everything advanced and complex simply stopping. "How many ships did you lose?" Velmorth asked quietly. "We were a patrol group of 6 vessels," Morven said. "Dawn's Fury is the only one that made it back. And only because our junior engineer, a young recruit who barely passed his exams, managed to manually restart some of the oldest backup systems. The ones built with basic mechanical parts. Everything else was dead." More reports came in over the next several hours. Day stayed in the command center, listening as the situation grew worse and worse. 3 entire star systems had gone dark. No communications, no ship traffic, nothing. The Yethal Collective, a civilization known for having the most advanced technology in the galaxy, had stopped responding to all hails. Same with the ascended minds of Praxis, a race of evolved telepaths who existed mostly as pure thought. "The unraveling," Hannah whispered, her telepathic voice touched with fear. The prophecy was true. "It's really coming." The council convened an emergency session. Every species sent representatives. The chamber was packed with worried faces, nervous gestures and frightened whispers in 100 different languages. War Chief Kaldrine stood at the center of the chamber, his 4 arms spread wide in a gesture of strength. "We will not hide and wait for this threat to find us. I propose we assemble our greatest fleet immediately. Every advanced warship we have. Every cutting-edge weapon system. Every tactical advantage we possess. We will meet this unraveling in open space and destroy it before it reaches our worlds." Most of the council members made sounds of agreement. The Kethrak were born warriors. Their solution to every problem was to fight it head-on with overwhelming force. Day stood up from his seat at the back of the chamber. His legs felt weak, but he made himself speak. "That's a mistake." Every head in the chamber turned to look at him. The room went completely silent. Kaldrine's eyes narrowed. "With respect, human, I have commanded fleets for 300 years. I have fought in wars you cannot imagine. I have. And I've been paying attention," Day interrupted, his voice shaking but determined. "Look at the pattern, War Chief. The unraveling targets sophistication. Advanced technology fails first. Evolved psionic abilities make you vulnerable. The more complex something is, the easier it is for this thing to consume it. If you send your best ships with your best weapons, you're giving it exactly what it wants." "So you propose we do nothing?" Velmorth asked. "I propose we think simpler," Day said. "Whatever this thing is, it feeds on complexity. We need to." "Enough," Kaldrine growled. "I will not base military strategy on the guesses of a maintenance worker. The council will vote now. All in favor of immediate military action." Almost every hand, claw, tentacle, and appendage in the chamber rose in agreement. Day sat back down feeling sick. Hannah floated beside him, her smoky form flickering with worry. They will not listen, she said directly into his mind. No, Day agreed quietly. They won't. Over the next 2 days, Caldrine assembled the largest armada in galactic history. 50 warships, each one equipped with the most advanced technology available. Quantum torpedoes that could crack planets. Reality distortion shields that bent space itself. Artificial intelligence systems that could process 1 billion tactical scenarios per second. Psionic amplifiers that turned telepathic specialists into living weapons. Day watched from an observation deck as the fleet prepared to depart. Each ship was a masterpiece of engineering, bristling with weapons and glowing with power. They looked invincible. They're going to die, Day said to Hannah, who floated beside him. I know, she replied sadly. The fleet launched with great ceremony. Crowds gathered at viewing stations to watch them go. There were speeches about courage and strength and the indomitable spirit of galactic civilization. Caldrine's voice boomed over every speaker on the station, promising victory. 3 days later, the fleet returned. 5 ships out of 50. Dawn's Fury looked pristine compared to these wrecks. They dragged themselves back to the station on emergency power, their hulls melted, their systems fried, their crews barely alive. Caldrine's flagship was a burned-out shell. They carried the war chief to medical on an emergency stretcher, all 4 of his arms wrapped in regeneration bandages. His armor was gone. His skin was covered in burns. Park Day stood in the Hall of Eternity with his hands pressed against the glowing stones. Holographic images floated in the air around him, showing the unraveling as it moved through space. It was enormous, not a ship or a creature but something else entirely. A presence. A consciousness that stretched across light years, consuming everything sophisticated and complex that it touched. But as Day watched the patterns in the images, he saw something. A weakness hidden in plain sight. It can't consume what it doesn't recognize as sophisticated, Day said, turning to face the assembled council members who had crowded into the hall. His voice was quiet but steady. We need to strip the station. Every advanced system, every quantum computer, every artificial intelligence, every piece of technology more complex than a simple combustion engine. We take it all offline. The chamber erupted in protests. Voices in a dozen languages shouted objections. You're asking us to become primitives, someone yelled. We would be defenseless. This is madness. Ambassador Velmorith raised one crystalline arm, and slowly the room quieted. Explain your reasoning, Keeper Day. Day took a deep breath. Look at what happened to the fleet. The unraveling targeted the most advanced systems first. Quantum weapons died before conventional missiles. AI computers failed before mechanical calculators. Telepaths with evolved minds went catatonic, but beings with simple thoughts survived. It feeds on sophistication. If we make ourselves simple enough, it won't see us as food. This is insane, someone muttered. Do we have a better option? Velmorith asked the room. Nobody answered. How long do we have? 3 days, Hannah's telepathic voice whispered in everyone's minds. Velmorith's body flickered through every color of the rainbow as he thought. Finally he settled on a deep, determined blue. Then we have no choice. The council is dismissed. Everyone will follow Keeper Day's instructions. We will do whatever he says. The next 72 hours were complete chaos. Day organized work teams, dividing the massive station into sections. He showed them techniques his father had taught him back in the auto repair shop in Seoul. How to use simple tools, how to think mechanically instead of digitally, how to fix things with basic parts instead of complex systems. Silne became his constant shadow, learning quickly. Her crystalline hands were clumsy at first with manual wrenches and screwdrivers, but she practiced until she got better. I never realized how much we relied on technology to do everything for us, she said, tightening a bolt by hand. War Chief Caldrine, still recovering from his injuries, coordinated the military personnel from a mobile chair. All 4 of his arms were bandaged, but his mind was sharp. Engineering teams focus on the outer hull sections first. We need manual airlocks and mechanical pressure seals. They ripped out quantum processors that could think faster than light and replaced them with mechanical computers that used actual gears and switches. They removed force fields and installed thick steel bulkheads with manual locks that required physical keys. The beautiful antimatter reactor at the station's core was shut down and replaced with a network of chemical fuel cells, primitive by galactic standards, but reliable and simple. The navigation system that used artificial intelligence to plot courses through subspace was stripped out completely. Day showed them how to use paper star charts and manual calculations. Scientists who had won awards for their brilliant minds now sat at tables with pencils, doing mathematics by hand. "This is humiliating," one of them complained. "This is survival," Day corrected. On the second day, a TAR-9 engineer approached Day with a problem. "The communication system is too complex. Even our basic radio transmitters have quantum components. If we remove them, we won't be able to coordinate between sections of the station." Day thought for a moment, then smiled. "Handheld radios. The kind humans used 50 years ago. They're purely analog, just electromagnetic waves and simple circuits. I saw some in a museum storage bay once. They found dozens of the old devices covered in dust. Within hours, ambassadors and scientists who had once communicated through quantum-encrypted telepathic networks were now talking to each other using crackling handheld radios like ancient explorers. The sight of high scholar Hannah holding a radio in her smoky hands, trying to figure out which button to push, would have been funny under different circumstances. On the third day they finished just as the sensors, the last advanced systems they kept running until the final moment, detected the unraveling approaching. "Shut down the sensors," Day ordered. "Everything goes offline now." The lights flickered as the main power grid died. Emergency chemical lights came on, bathing the station in a dim yellow glow. The constant hum of advanced systems faded away, replaced by the clank and hiss of mechanical equipment. It felt like stepping back in time 1,000 years. Day stood at an observation window, watching as the unraveling arrived. It looked like a wave of distorted space, bending light and reality as it moved. His eyes hurt to look at it directly. The wave swept over the station like a tsunami. Every remaining advanced system died instantly. The handful of quantum computers they had missed simply stopped working. A few scientists who had tried to maintain their full telepathic abilities cried out and collapsed, holding their heads. But the mechanical locks held. The chemical batteries kept the emergency lights burning. The manual life support systems continued to pump air and scrub carbon dioxide. The simple radios kept working. In the Hall of Eternity, the ancient stones pulsed with steady light. Day could feel the unraveling's consciousness washing through the corridors, probing, searching for the sophisticated technology it craved. But everywhere it looked, it found only simple machines, gears and levers and basic circuits that did not register as advanced enough to consume. The presence moved through the station like a predator sniffing for prey, confused by what it could not find. "It's working," Silne whispered beside him, her radio clutched in her hands. "Not yet," Day said quietly. "Now comes the hard part." He walked to the Hall of Eternity and placed his hands on the stones. They blazed with light, forming a communication channel, not through quantum entanglement or subspace transmission, but through simple electromagnetic waves that the unraveling could not classify as sophisticated technology. Day spoke. Not in complex mathematics or advanced philosophy, but in the most basic concepts that any consciousness could understand. Existence. Coexistence. Balance. "You consume complexity," Day said, his voice carrying through the electromagnetic channel the stones created. "You eat sophisticated technology and evolved minds. But consumption itself is the simplest behavior in the universe. A single function. Eat and grow. That's what bacteria do. That's what fire does. You've reduced yourself to the most primitive drive that exists. You're not sophisticated. You're simple." The unraveling's presence stopped moving through the station. "Real sophistication," Day continued, "is knowing when not to consume. It's choosing balance over growth. It's seeing value in simplicity instead of always seeking complexity. You think you're advanced, but you're just hungry. And hunger is the oldest, simplest thing there is." For long minutes nothing happened. The distorted space around the station pulsed and shifted as the vast consciousness processed what it had been told. A paradox from a being it could not categorize, a janitor using ancient stones and basic words, presenting a logical problem it had never encountered. Then slowly, gradually, the wave of distortion began to pull back. Not defeated, but retreating. Withdrawing to contemplate this simple truth it had been shown by the most unsophisticated being it had ever met. The unraveling left. The command center erupted in cheers that echoed through the station's mechanical communication systems. 2 weeks later, Park Day was back in his maintenance uniform, mopping the floor of the Hall of Eternity. The council had offered him everything: a seat among the ambassadors, a position as chief advisor, his own ship, wealth beyond measure. He had turned it all down. "I'm a janitor," he had explained to Velmorith. "It's what I'm good at. It's what makes me happy." The ambassador had accepted his decision with respect. Humanity's status had been elevated to full council membership. The other species now regularly consulted their human colleagues, valuing perspectives they had once dismissed as primitive. In the hall, an eighth stone had appeared overnight, smaller than the others, glowing with soft, steady light whenever Day walked past. He was finishing his shift when his old data pad chimed. A video call from Earth. His daughter's face appeared on the cracked screen, nervous and hopeful. "Hi Dad," Lee Minicio said softly. "I saw the news. About what you did. I'm proud of you." Day's throat tightened. Tears blurred his vision. "Minicio, I'm so sorry. For leaving. For everything. Can we talk?" she asked. "Really talk? I know it's been 3 years, but maybe—" "I'd like that very much," Day said, his voice thick with emotion. They talked for over an hour. It was awkward and painful and honest and real. When they finally said goodbye, his daughter was smiling. They made plans to talk again next week. Day returned to his mopping, humming an old song his father used to sing while working in the repair shop. Around him, the greatest minds in the galaxy went about their business. Sometimes they stopped to ask the janitor for his perspective. He was always happy to help. After all, someone had to keep things clean and simple in a complicated universe.